This is what happened to us for playing the Ouija board. So this guy says that this happened to him 4 years ago when he was 14 years old. He admits that his friend loved watching scary videos, scary stories, anything that would cause them to be scared they were interested in. And on this particular night, they were having a sleepover at one of the friend's house. His friend's parents were not there that night. They had the older brother be in charge, but the older brother basically said, hey, you could do whatever you want, don't break anything, and he locked himself up in his room. One of his friends ends up pulling a big box out of his backpack, and it was a Ouija board. The kid said it belonged to his dad and that they never used it. He remembers his friend put it on the table and they all started laughing, they all started joking, and they didn't touch it until it was midnight. It was between midnight and 1 in the morning. They turned off all the lights and they just had like this little lantern on. And they did read the instructions that were on the box. Don't play alone, don't make fun, don't take this as a joke, and always make sure to say goodbye. They all end up holding hands very nervously, and then they all placed their fingers on the planchette. They asked if there was a spirit present. 2 or 3 minutes passed after they asked that and nothing happened. He admits that he was about to tell his friends that this thing was not working, it was a joke, and that was when the planchette was slowly starting to move and it went all the way to yes. They all started looking at each other thinking maybe one of them was the one pushing it. He looks at his friends and makes them all swear that it wasn't them moving it, and they all said that they were not moving it. They decided to ask another question just to see where it would go to, and they decided to ask it what time it was. The planchette ends up moving to 12:55 a.m. He ends up getting his cell phone out, and it was exactly the time that the Ouija board said it was. The ambiance changed, like they were not laughing anymore. This was not a game. That's when one of his friends ends up asking the question, what kind of spirit are you? The planchette didn't move so easily this time, but then it started moving to M-A-L-O, which means malo, which means bad in English. He says that when he spelled out M-A-L-O, bad, that he felt a chill go down his back. Before they can even ask another question, they heard as if somebody punched really hard on the floor they were at, which meant that they would have to be under them, which is just an empty room where they would put random stuff in. They all stayed very still, and then they heard again another punch to the floor where they were sitting at. The thing is, where they were at, they just had to look out of the door and they could see the stairs that led down and the door where you can enter and then eventually be below them. As they're looking down there, that door begins to open slowly, and then out of nowhere it just slammed shut so hard it made all of them jump up from where they were sitting at. He did not want to keep playing, but eventually when they all looked at the planchette that was still in that table, he said that the planchette was moving by itself without anybody even touching it. By itself, it started lettering T-E-V-E-O, which in Spanish means te veo, which in English means I see you. You see me? No, don't see me. And instantly after, Ouija board saying I see you, they heard one last hit below them again. One of the friends immediately screams that they need to close the session and say goodbye. They said goodbye several times and they all removed their fingers from that planchette. Now, he was supposed to stay the night there, but he said fuck that. He called his mom still shaking, telling her that he felt sick and she needed to come and pick him up. That night, he returned home and he was silent. He was so quiet. He was thinking about what the fuck had just happened. He thought to himself, well, at least I'm far away from when it happened. Everything will be fine. Nothing is gonna happen here in my house. He goes to his room. He lays down. He says that he falls asleep almost immediately. However, around 3:40 in the morning, he explains that he was awoken because he almost heard like a whispering. When he fully wakes up, he says that he hears the whisper almost like if it was really close to his ear, and it says, I see you. Oh my god. Obviously, he gets up and he turns the light on, and he says that if you sit up, right in front of his bed is a really big window and you can see like the garden, like the yard outside of his house. Past the garden, you can see the street, but he says that in the street, he saw this really dark like shadow just standing there. He couldn't make out who it was. He just knew that it was someone standing there and like watching him directly into his window. His heart started beating so fast he thought he was gonna faint, but he immediately gets up, runs to his parents' bedroom. He tells them that there was somebody outside. His dad gets up with a lantern, with a gun, and he goes out there to see who the fuck is outside of the house. However, he doesn't see anybody. He doesn't find anybody out there. He ends up telling them that they did play the Ouija board that night and what happened, and they were both really mad at him. They obviously tell him that that is not a game, that is not for fun, like that thing is serious, and they went as far as to get a priest to come and bless the house the next day. And they also talked to all of his friends' parents so that they would do the same thing, which I think it's nice. Like, they even thought about them, but like, yeah, y'all got in trouble. I just know y'all got in trouble. It has been 4 years, and he said that he will never forget that night. He will remember everything in detail, and he will never play with a Ouija board again.
Dude, so I just left my mom's house and she told me like a story that I really think has to do with the fact that CERN got shut off. You know how they say that CERN got shut off and like the timelines are overlapping and stuff? This story literally kind of proves that. So my mom and my dad were sitting on the couch a couple nights ago watching a movie together, and it was around like the evening hours or whatever, when all of a sudden they hear the squeaky door of my bedroom, or what would have been my bedroom back in the day. It's now my daughter's room for when she goes over there to visit them. But anyway, so they heard that door open up, and they heard footsteps walk down the hallway a little bit, knock on the door at the end of the hallway, which would have been my brother's bedroom. Oh my God. And then they heard my voice ask my brother if he wanted to go outside and play with me. They heard my bedroom door squeak open, footsteps walk around the corner down the hallway, a knock on what would be my brother's door, and my fucking voice asking my brother if he wanted to come outside and play with me. Mind you, they have lived alone for years. They don't even have animals anymore. All of our family pets have since passed away. They haven't gotten any more pets. Not that that would be a pet, because they literally heard my voice. We're like in the midst of it, they looked at each other and they're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, we've got to be hallucinating or dreaming or something. But the fact that they both heard the exact same thing, and when they got up to investigate, my door, what would have been my door, was wide open. And what would have been my brother's door was wide open. Everything in the room was untouched and not changed, except in my brother's room, they found his old stuffed animal, the one that he used to cuddle with the most. Like, the very first stuffed animal he ever got, which he did take with him when he moved out. So it should not have been, like, you know? So they were like, what the fuck? They just didn't have any explanation for it. And so they went to bed that night, just thinking, you know, whatever, we're just fucking old and crazy, just hallucinating. Trying to come up with any excuse, right? But the next day when they woke up, she went in there to grab something and the stuffed animal was gone. She hadn't touched it the night before when she saw it, and she already thought that it was weird because his room had been cleaned out and he didn't leave basically any of his like special personal belongings. It was basically like the bare bones of a room, just a bed, his old dresser, and his old desk and stuff, like maybe a few little trinkets that he left behind that he didn't want to take. But that stuffed animal should not have been there. They both fucking saw it. Dude, I don't know. I'm just we've had so many problems with like hauntings in that house since I used the Ouija board in it when I was little. Like, I unleashed something. So I don't know if it could be the mimic that I've been dealing with on that property, or like just following me around. I don't know, to be honest with you, but it really lines up, I think, with this whole CERN thing shutting down and how it's like messed with time and space itself. Like, I don't know if you've realized how long the days are getting. Do you guys have any explanations? Because I didn't even know what to say to them. They're not the type to like be the conspiracy theorists. So if I started talking to them about CERN, they would be like, what? Because I don't fucking know. It honestly sounds like I'm saying, like, it sounds like a timeline shift. Like, they were experiencing one of the moments that we had back in the day when we lived there as children. Like, I don't know. I don't, like, residual energy. I don't know. I don't know how to explain this.
A series of spooky stories except for its women's intuition. When my twin sister and I moved out of town for college, our only transportation were our bikes. This was many years ago. One day, my sister, a friend, and I decided to go to the movie theater. My friend also did not have a car. She had a bike. As we were traveling down the street, my sister, friend, and I were all riding in a straight line with me in the rear. No one was far from each other. As we passed an apartment parking lot, my sister and friend passed with no problem, but I was hit by a car. I flew through the air and landed on the pavement. Luckily, I only had bumps and bruises. My bike did not make it. The lady who hit me felt very bad and offered to give me a ride back to my dorm apartment. As soon as I walked through the front door, our apartment phone rang. It was my mom. She was panicking. She said she was cutting someone's hair. She's a hairstylist and had a vision that I was in a car accident. My mom was about 50 miles away at that moment. Her description of her vision was exactly what happened to me. I was around 13 years old walking home from school. I was walking down a usually busy street. This day it was almost empty, towards a park, and had gotten a weird feeling, but I ignored it as I have anxiety about everything and I thought I was just being dramatic. I noticed a large van pull over about 20 meters in front of me with all of the visible windows tinted so dark you couldn't see a thing. I started to feel uneasy, but I kept walking thinking the driver had pulled over to check their phone. The feeling got worse the closer I got, and I knew not to ignore it. I crossed the road behind the van, and as soon as I started to cross, the van sped off so quickly I thought it might crash. My family and myself have had moments our intuition has gotten us out of bad situations for years. I strongly believe that if I had kept walking, whoever was in the van would have taken me right off the street. When I was 15, I had a dream about my older sister who lived on a different continent, and when I woke up, the only thing that I could think of was that we needed to call her. She'd had a miscarriage and hadn't told anyone. Another time that year, my other sister ran away from home because my family didn't approve of things that she was doing, aspiring to be with a guy that my mom didn't approve of, but I kept having dreams of her dying for months. She ended up marrying him. Exactly a month after they got married, she died. The night before she died, we were together, and I was so angry at her for stirring the pot with my mom for months, but all that anger left me when I saw her the night before she died. But now I'm having dreams about my mom dying when I'm 17, and it's giving me really bad anxiety. I really don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you. That is really scary. That is really freaky. In November of 2023, my mom's boyfriend was diagnosed with cancer. No one knew how bad it was, but we were told that his chances of survival were high. I was in gym class one day, and I just remember getting this overwhelming feeling of dread, like a pit in my stomach. I sat down on the bleachers, and my friend had come up to me asking me what was wrong. I broke down crying, which is very unusual for me, and I told him that I had a gut feeling that my mom's boyfriend was going to pass. 2 months later, we found out that it was stage 4 and the chemo wasn't working, but there was still a chance that he would survive. I again had that same feeling but brushed it off. He ended up passing away February 24th, surrounded by his family and friends. Ever since then, I've learned to trust my gut. I was starting a new job during COVID. My son was 1 year old. We were outside and I was feeding him breakfast while I was getting dressed for work. I went inside to put my hair up. I came out and went to give him a sip of green juice. I got a gut feeling and took the sip myself. There was a bee in the cup that stung my lip. My lips swelled up 3 fingers wide. I'm grateful that I trusted my intuition. If it would have been him, we know what the dots mean. I was grateful that we were wearing masks. Only time. We also went on a bike ride where they were giving out that thing that was safe and effective. I felt this horrific feeling of dread and heard that the words liquid chaos. I got so many of these. I don't understand that last one. I'm very confused. January 5th, 2025 at around 11 a.m. we got the phone call. My grandfather had passed. Before anyone had said anything, I said, I know, because I felt it. I knew that he passed. Fast forward to March 2025, I had a dream about him. He told me he was at his own funeral, showing me where he was standing, which was right next to my grandmother. He then proceeded to tell me that he loves my sister. It turns out that my sister fell pregnant not too long after that dream. I truly believe he sent my niece to my sister as she struggled with infertility for over 10 years. If you ever have a gut feeling, please just listen to it. I didn't, and for the rest of my life, I'll regret it. I work every holiday, including New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. My second oldest brother called me 12/31/25. I missed his call because I was sleeping. The next day, New Year's Day, I heard the voicemail that he left. I had the urge to call him, but since I was working, I couldn't. I forgot to call him. From then on, every day I had the feeling to call him, but I was so busy from work. I got home exhausted, and every time we talked for hours. So finally, on 1/12, before I went to sleep, I thought tomorrow I will definitely call him no matter what. 1/13/26, I got off work, took a shower, and said I gotta call my brother. At 7:15ish, my twin sister calls me and says that our brother is deceased. That is so sad. Come back for another episode.
And to think, just a few months ago, I had no idea that a dog man even existed. And now I cannot stop coming across these stories. A man telling this story, we're going to call him Jim, said that many years ago, he had an encounter. And this took place in Matanuska Valley, in Alaska. Jim says that he at the time had no idea what this could have been, so he kind of referred to it as the monster, but it wasn't until just a couple months ago that he stumbled across a forum of a lot of people talking about dogmen. So now he can put a name to it. Jim was in his early 20s when this happened, and he was working a swing shift, and he had 100 miles of a drive to and then also from work. So by the time he would get home, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. He said he saw this monster at the northernmost section of Trunk Road. He said that the area is almost smack in the middle between the towns of Palmer and Wasilla. I hope I pronounced that right. Jim said, I was about 10 minutes from home at the time, so it must have been about 2 a.m. He says that Trunk Road is a very narrow 2-lane road that consists of many twists and turns. He also mentions that the surrounding terrain is kind of thick and swampy with lots of black spruce. He said it was late October and it was just days before Halloween and there was no snow on the ground. Jim says it was cold enough though to be wary of ice. He said he was driving about 20 miles an hour around a curve when his headlights caught a large dark figure up ahead. He says that he's about 6 car lengths away and just kind of a natural reaction, he let off the gas and he started to sort of coast in that direction because he kind of wanted to see what this thing was. So at first he assumed it was a moose because the area was infested with them, as he says. But then upon closer inspection, he realized, no, this thing is standing on 2 legs. So then he's like, so a bear? And then very quickly, no, not a bear. This thing looked strange because this was tall enough to be an uncommonly large bear, but it was way too slender. And this is the part that really caught my attention. He said it looked like it had spikes running up and down its head and back. So Jim's thinking to himself, a Halloween prop? That would be an odd but quite effective place for one. So he's thinking all of this to himself in a fraction of a second as the car slowly coasts a little bit closer, and then he starts to be able to see even more detail. He said it was standing in profile as it was gazing across the road. He could clearly see its wolfish muzzle and large upright ears, and those spikes on its back were in fact clumps of fur, which is a very interesting detail. He said its spine curved in a very natural looking way. It was standing in the ditch inches from the pavement. So Jim says that because he was so focused on its upper body, he didn't really get a good understanding of what the back of its legs looked like or whether or not it had a tail. And I think if I remember correctly, you guys say the difference between Dogman and Wolfman, one of them, or not Wolfman, sorry, Dogman and a werewolf is that one does not have a tail. Which one is that again? Now, he did get a pretty good look at the front of its legs and he describes them as very dog-like. Like what a dog would look like if it were to be standing on its 2 hind legs. He said while it clearly had a canine look about it the entire thing, he said something was just extremely off about this thing that he can't quite put into words. So Jim says that this thing was standing completely still. And since it was just days before Halloween, he still legitimately thought that this was just a really weirdly placed Halloween prop. He also makes a side note because it was clearly not any existing animal. Or was it? He was genuinely impressed, and then he started to step on the brakes because he wanted to stop and take a look at this thing a little bit closer. And then he said that just then, this thing turned and quickly looked at him. And he said in that fraction of a second, he immediately regretted the decision and knew that stopping was a mistake. He said that the way it turned its head so fluidly totally negated any of those previous thoughts that it might be some kind of a prop. His words were, it was horribly, terrifyingly alive. He said that the pale off-white glow in its eye shine completely ruled out it maybe being a person wearing a mask. As he coasted towards this thing very slowly, he was just gaping at it for a few seconds in absolute shock. As he came upon this thing, if it wanted to, it could have easily reached forward and literally grabbed his car. So he said he had to look up at its face again just to see it one more time. And he said he's about 5'4". This thing was way taller than him. He said at least 7 or 8 feet tall. And then all of a sudden he snapped out of his trance and he slammed his foot on the gas. He said that car fishtailed and he was certain he was going to end up in a ditch, but the tires would catch. And then he said he drove all the way home like a maniac. And no, he did not look back. Jim says that he has only ever been on that stretch of road a few times since. And no, never alone and never in the dark. Get this. He said for the next several years, he would drive an extra 20 plus miles out of the way just to avoid Trunk Road. He said this thing never made any aggressive moves, but there was something about it that felt absolutely predatory. Since then, he has never heard of anything else remotely like it again. Pretty cool, guys. I've heard of all kinds of places where dogmen are, a lot of them in Texas, never in Alaska though. This is new to me. All right, what are your thoughts? You got to drop them in the comments. I always love a good debate on the differences between dogmen and werewolves. I still don't fully understand it, but I am here for it. All right, drop your thoughts below. And if you are interested in Creepy Storytime merch, click the link in my bio. And if you're new here, you got to follow for more Creepy Storytime.
All of you cryptid fans, or for those of you who like to theorize about strange creatures in the woods, I have a story for you. This came from Caleb, and Caleb says in 2016 he saw a creature that was as big as a calf but that moved like a reptile in an area just north of Guadalajara, Mexico. I have no idea what this could be, and he doesn't either, so he said he's sharing this with the hopes that someone else knows what he's talking about, because this has bothered him ever since it happened. He said that he and two of his friends one night were coming back from a big festival. Were on horseback, and they had been out all day because every year on November 17th there's this big party that happens in a neighboring town called San Miguel, and he said it's essentially 3 days of dances, of music, and of a rodeo. There was a lot of cowboys and ranchers around, and so wanting to fit in, they rode their horses up, and they had been there all day. He said they got there around 10 in the morning. They spent the day just visiting and watching bull rides and talking to girls, trying to impress them. Nothing weird or out of the ordinary, but they had a really good time that day. And toward the end of the night, everything was winding down, and they had a long trek back. It was about 2 hours through old roads through the woods. They said despite this, they weren't intimidated by any means. They had done this ride many times, both for the party and for other reasons, and they trusted their horses' senses. Caleb says he and his friends knew the trail well enough to be confident riding it after dark. So they had been riding for about an hour and a half, and he said they were far enough away where they could no longer hear or see any semblance of this party. And he remembers it was a new moon, which may be relevant to the story, he doesn't know. It was a very, very dark night, but it didn't bother them, and they're riding along and they're talking about the day and about the rides they had seen and about the girls they had met. Then off to the right of the trail, his friend Miguel is like, hey, do you see that thing moving? And they all look over and they notice that there's some type of animal in the woods that seems to be moving at the same pace that their horses are moving. As they looked through the trees and the darkness, they couldn't really make out what this animal was. They thought maybe it was a dog because it seemed to be moving on 4 legs, and thought maybe it had followed them from the festival. But they weren't sure, and they wanted to be safe, so they quickened their pace on horseback a little bit just to outrun whatever this was. If it was a dog, they weren't sure if it was friendly, and so they urged their horses faster, and they broke into a run for about 5 minutes. After they had covered a little bit of distance, they slowed down their pace and let their horses breathe. And Miguel says that thing is still there, but now it's closer. And they all looked over, and sure enough, they still see a shape in the woods, but now it's closer, and it looks to be about the size of a yearling cow. Caleb's friend Jose, being a bit more daring, said, I'll take care of this, and he urged his horse closer to the creature to run it off. As he got closer to it, it did seem to run off, but now they could make out that it wasn't a cow, and it wasn't a dog, and it wasn't a jaguar, which is what they were concerned about. It wasn't a mountain lion either, because it moved like a reptile. He said it almost waddled, but as far as they knew, there were no crocodiles in the area where they lived. Plus, this thing was moving through the trees. It wasn't a wetland, and he said it stood on legs that were too long, and it was too big to be any creature that he knew of that lived in a water system. After it ran away, Jose rode closer to the group, and he said, I have no idea what that thing was. And so the group decided again to run their horses. He says they were moving at a quick pace, but not quite racing, when all of a sudden they heard this scream come from the woods that was unrecognizable to any of them. He said it wasn't a growl, it was like a shriek, but it was like metal on metal. As it made that sound, whatever it was panicked their horses. They were fighting at the bit. They were trying to gallop. No sooner had that shriek let up when from the other side of them, they heard the same kind of call answering the first one. He says at that point, all 3 of them gave up any pretenses they had, and they let their horses run. So they moved down the trail full tilt as fast as their horses would let them, when after a few minutes he decided to look over his shoulder to see if they had finally lost whatever it was that was chasing them. But as he looked over behind him, he was horrified because now there were two creatures on the trail behind them that seemed to almost be keeping pace with the horses. That I have no idea what I was looking at. These things moved like reptiles. They waddled almost, but they were taller and bulkier. Horses didn't want to seem to slow down either, and as the lights from their town came up, the creatures behind them seemed to fall off in the distance. Caleb says to this day he has no idea what those creatures were, but he's certain that had they not let the horses run, those things would have caught up with them, and he's sure they were hunting them. He said, neither me nor my friends have seen those creatures again, but none of us will ride that trail after dark since that happened. Well, that said, he is still curious about what he saw that night, so if you have any thoughts, let him know. He would love to hear them. If you have a spooky, scary story time of your own, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
You're in prison, but they give you the option of a way to get out, but you have to be lowered into the portal of the underworld and tell them what you see. Are you going to do it?
Probably.
Okay, I'm going to tell you and him both at the same time about Huska Castle, because it's a castle built in the 1300s in the Czech Republic. It's built kind of like in the middle of nowhere. There's no water nearby. There's no road for trade or anything. The castle doesn't even have a kitchen in it, so why was it built? Yeah, it's weird that it doesn't have a kitchen. Apparently, back in the day, in the 1300s, there was just this random hole that they would throw things into, and they could never hear anything hit the bottom. Well, then villagers started reporting seeing these dark winged figures that were like half human flying out of it. So they go to like the main guy and they're like, hey, we got to do something about this. He thinks he wants to build on top of it, but first he wants to know what's in it, because he doesn't want to build on top of it and trap whatever was in it out. He tells the guards, hey, get down in that hole and tell me what's in there. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. So they go and ask the prisoners if they want to do it, which is weird to me that they ask them. I wouldn't think that they would give them like the option, but anyway, they lower him down. The first guy, he's down there for a few seconds. He starts screaming for them to pull him up. Pull him up. His hair had turned white. They said he'd aged like 40 years. He didn't speak, and he died 3 days later. The next guy, they put him down. He's down there for like a few seconds. They pull him back up. He said that there were clawed things down in there, and he died like within a few days. So the guy's like, okay, yeah, let's build on top of it. And they build a church, and they put statues of the Archangel Michael in it, because he's the one that originally sent you know who, you know where. So they thought that he would be a good one to guard it. You can visit there now, by the way, if you want to. Do you want to go?
Maybe.
I don't want to go. No, that's the one place
right
I
there
don't.
next to Germany,
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah, no. It's like 40 miles from Prague, I think. He's just saying he would go because he knows I wouldn't, so that's a safe thing for him to say.
I mean,
You don't like ghost stuff.
I don't, but I like history.
A lot of more dark things happen there throughout history, and if you want to know the rest of that, you'll have to go and listen to my podcast episode about it. So, yeah.
Check it out.
A lot of people wonder why they say in the Appalachians not to go into the woods at night, not to whistle, not to sing, and always make sure you close your windows and you lock your doors, and absolutely never respond to anything that calls your name. So this goes back to an old Native American belief in the area that these mountains were home to spirits and that they would come out and wander during the night. And I've heard two stories that will give you an idea as to why you should not do these things at night. So there was a man named Jeff. He lived outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. And he was told about this spot up in the mountains where there was some good mushrooms. But no one would go to this area because they were very superstitious. So Jeff thinks, I'm going to go to this area and get a good haul. And, you know, what do I care? There's no such thing as ghost. So he goes out, he parks his car, he goes into the woods, and he's hunting for several hours. He starts to notice the sun is going down, it's getting dark. It's time to head back to his vehicle. Now, as he's walking through the woods, he all of a sudden hears, Jeff, Jeff, come here. Come, Jeff. And he hears his name being called. So Jeff knows from legend that if you hear something calling your name, you do not respond. So he just keeps on walking, and all of a sudden he hears this louder and louder, you know, his name being called. And then he starts hearing screaming coming from deep in the woods. And he hears laughter, and he hears what sounds like people just talking all around him. So he starts walking faster and faster, and he knows the way he came in, but for some reason, it feels like the trees are almost moving and he is going in the wrong direction now. And finally, he comes out sort of to this open area and he sees a man standing out in this field, but he's turned around looking in the opposite direction. So Jeff goes up and approaches this guy and says, "Excuse me, sir, do you know the route back to the highway?" And when this man turns around, Jeff realizes that it's himself. And he's all bloody and bruised, and he's just staring back at him. So Jeff runs as fast as he can for several miles, gets in his car, and drives back home. Later that night, he's awoken to hearing voices inside his room calling out to him, "Jeff, come back, come." And so Jeff never went back into the woods again, mushroom hunting. And the second story I've heard is there was a couple who decided they were going to live in the Appalachian Mountains for a summer. They find this cabin for rent, and they're surprised at how cheap the price is for 6 months. So they rent this cabin, and they go out there, and they bring all their stuff to move in. And this guy in a truck, he meets them out there, and he's very nervous. And he tells them, "Hey, at night, you're going to want to lock your doors and close the blinds." And then he gets in his truck and he leaves as fast as he can. So this couple is just in awe of how nice this log cabin is and the fact that they got it for almost, this huge steal. So that night they go into their cabin, they make themselves comfortable. It gets dark. And all of a sudden they hear a thump, thump, thump up on the roof. And it sounds like something or someone is walking across the roof. And then they hear banging on the side of the house, and they hear these large booms and creaks and sounds coming all around them from outside. It sounds almost like their house is being invaded. Eventually, the sound dies down and daylight comes. The next day, same thing happens, and for several weeks this goes on. So finally, the husband is fed up, and he says, "You know what, I'm done. We're taking our home back. We're tired of being harassed." So in the middle of the night, when this sounds start happening again, he goes to the window, he opens the curtains, and then he looks out the window, and standing out behind the window is a woman. And she has this pale, long face and white, gray hair going over her shoulders. And he notices she has solid white eyes, and she's just staring at him. And then she points directly at him, and that's when all hell breaks loose. He starts hearing banging on the roof, banging on the sides of the house. The house feels like almost like an earthquake is happening. And then he shuts the blinds, they run into the bathroom, and they hide for the rest of the night. The next day, they decide, we're through with this, and they leave, never to return again.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine, but come on, bestie, yeah! Hi, bestie boo, I missed you. What are you doing? You know it's time to get your snacks, right? And your gardening essentials? Okay, I'm glad you know. Anyway, sit back and relax. And don't forget to go to my YouTube channel if you want my stories in long form. And don't watch nobody else's because they're making money off of me. Those weren't even words, but whatever, you're gonna take it. Anyways, this story happened in West Africa. For the sake of the story, let's call this guy Peter. Now, this happened when Peter was about like 6 or 7 years old. Growing up, Peter and his grandma were literally like mom and son. I mean, he loved his mom, but questionably, he loved his grandma more. Of course, you know, kids, they're gonna love their grandma more because the mom gotta have the rules, the grandma don't have any, right? And I mean, they were super, super close. When he wakes up in the morning, he going to grandma's house. He's spending the day at grandma's house. Grandma is taking him everywhere with her, and grandma loved it just as much. Peter was also the only child, so, you know. Until one day, Peter went to school, right? Normally. And he comes back from school, and usually after school, he would go straight to his grandma's house because grandma would always make him some food. And then later on, he'll go back to his parents' house. So boom, after school, he goes to grandma's house. Except when he got to grandma's house, there was a whole bunch of family members there. Like a lot of people was at the house for some reason. And his parents was also there too. So he like, why are y'all all at my grandma's house? Y'all need to move. I need to see my grandma. Where's grandma? And everybody is looking at him with sad eyes. And he's a kid, so he's not really understanding what's happening just yet. Until his parents take him and say, hey, let's go home. He's like, no, I don't want to go home. I want to see my grandma. And my grandma said she was going to cook my food today. So I want to see my grandma. I want to eat my grandma's food. And his parents were like, no, baby, let's go home. He's like, no, I want to see my grandma. So he walks in the house. Grandma, he's looking for grandma in every room. Every room has a family member but his grandmother. So he's like, what is going on? And so his parents had to sit him down and basically tell him that his grandma passed away. And at first, he didn't believe them because he's like, I just saw grandma in the morning. Like, there's no way grandma died. I just saw her in the morning and she was completely fine. And so he's in complete denial, right? He's not believing everybody. It wasn't until more family members started to come and, you know, people were breaking the news to the family members coming and everybody was like breaking down to where he's like, oh, like grandma really died? Like, no way. So the grief hit him and he started to cry because, like I said, grandma was his best friend. So boom, that happens. For a couple days until the funeral, he's refusing to eat. Nobody can console him and he's like absolutely miserable. He said till this day, like he misses his grandma so much. This shit still affects him till this day. He feel like he was way too young to have lost his grandma that young. Anyway, so the funeral comes around and funeral day was probably like the hardest part for him because he had to literally see his grandma in that, you know? And so he spent the entire day either numb or crying. He was literally going back and forth from being numb and then just like bawling. Anyway, so after the funeral, you know, they have everybody get together. They all get together at grandma's house. Some people decided to stay. Some people, you know, decided to go back home. His parents decided to stay at grandma's house, mostly because he didn't want to go home. He wanted to stay at grandma's house because part of him really could still not believe that grandma was dead. Part of him is like, bro, grandma's gonna show up at any minute and prove you guys wrong. So the night of the funeral, he told everybody, I want to sleep in grandma's room. And at first they were like, no, we can't let you sleep in grandma's room. And baby, if they wanted war, that's what they got, because he started breaking and tantrum like everything. He wants to sleep in his freaking grandmother's room. And so they're like, okay. If that's what's going to calm you down, you can sleep in grandma's room. And he tells them, I want to be there by myself. I don't want nobody sleeping there with me. I want to be there by myself. And so they're still trying to understand, you know, he's still a kid. This is a lot for him. So they're like, okay, cool. His parents decided to stay in the very next room just in case, right? And so he goes to his grandmother's bed and he's like crying up until he basically cries himself to sleep. He was just like crying and talking and like asking grandma to come back. Anyways, he cries himself to sleep. He falls asleep. In the middle of the night, he wakes up. But he only woke up because he heard someone outside sweeping, like by grandma's window, sweeping. Now, for a second, he was very happy, right? Because he went to sleep. If you've ever dealt with grief, you know sleeping is the worst part, because when you sleep and then you have to wake up to reality. And the other thing is that grandma would always wake up at 5 a.m. to go outside and sweep. And so when he woke up to the sound of someone sweeping, he's like, I fucking told y'all. I told y'all grandma was fine. And so he quickly looks out the window, right? But he doesn't see anybody there. He hears someone sweeping, but he does not see anyone. So he goes back to grandma's bed to try to keep listening. And as he's listening, he still hears the sweeping. And as the person is sweeping, the person starts to hum the same thing grandma would do. And so he looks outside the window again. He doesn't see anyone. And so he's having mixed emotions right now, right? Which causes him to start crying all over again. So he's in the bed crying. He's listening to his grandma sweeping and humming. And as he's there crying, he hears his grandma's voice calling him. And his grandma says to him verbatim, Peter, come help me with these leaves. And so he gets up like, Grandma? He didn't actually say it though, but like in his mind, he's like, Grandma? Like, because although he was sad and devastated, he still knew the rules because it's, you know, it's Africa. He knew not to answer to nobody at night. Like I said, we all grew up knowing this stuff. And so grandma says it again, Peter, come help me with these leaves. And for a split second, he really wanted to go outside and help his grandma. But the other part of him, thank goodness, also remembered that he was just at a funeral and he saw grandma in that casket. So that can't be grandma. And so grandma repeats herself again. She says, Peter, baby, please come help me with these leaves. So immediately he gets up, he goes to the next room where his parents are, and he wakes them up and he tells them everything that's happening right now. And so they go back to grandma's room and they stay there with him, right? And they also start hearing grandma sweeping and telling Peter to come help her with these leaves. And they're looking at Peter and they can tell Peter wants to go outside to help grandma with these leaves, but they cannot let him do that. So mom immediately went on mommy mode. She grabbed some salt, she put it around the window, she started putting it around the house. But she didn't seem surprised though. It wasn't something that was like surprising her, was like shocking. She just heard it. She was like, okay, well, I guess it's time to do this. And then when she comes back, she says, hey, Peter, come to our room and stay with us. But Peter still refuses. He's like, no, I'm staying here in grandma's room. And so they had to kind of like trick him and take him to the next room so that he can fall asleep. And once he fell asleep, dad went and woke up two of the other uncles and they went outside to cleanse the outside of the house. So fast forward to the next day, when Peter woke up, his parents sat him down and asked him, like, you know, basically, how did it happen? How did you wake up? To basically give them a rundown. And they wanted to make sure that he did not answer to when she was calling him. And so he told them, like, yeah, no, I didn't answer, although I really wanted to, but I didn't answer. And so they had to sit down and explain to him that there are spirits that take advantage of people like you, especially you were very close with grandma. That's how they lure you. If you would have went outside, we probably would have never seen you again. Unfortunately, that was not grandma. I know you're probably thinking it was, but it was not grandma. It's manipulative spirits waiting to take advantage of the ones that are vulnerable. And because he was the closest thing to grandma, literally, he was the easiest target. So yeah, that's the story, y'all. Don't forget to let me know what you were eating in the comments. And don't forget to grab your ebooks. The link is in my bio. And this actually makes me think, has anybody who dealt with grief used my ebook? I'm actually like curious about that. That's a new aspect I never really thought of. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to go to my YouTube channel to watch my story times in long form. And I love you. Bye.
An Appalachian skinwalker is much different than the Navajo skinwalker. Okay, the first difference is that a Navajo skinwalker, right, is conjured up by a medicine man, whereas an Appalachian skinwalker is conjured up by a witch in the Appalachia who uses black magic. The other big difference between the Appalachian skinwalker versus the native skinwalker is that the Appalachian skinwalker tends to take the form of objects, and a lot of time almost just comes as an invisible force that calls out to people or follows them, or for instance, the Bell Witch, right? It wasn't a witch going after that family. It was a skinwalker that was conjured up to harm and, you know, terrify that family. So I got a story for you. This is a true story now, and I'm going to show you a picture as well. So there's a man named Donald. Donald was an avid hunter and trapper. He lived near the North Carolina-Tennessee border up in the Appalachian Mountains. And one day, you know, he's out hunting and he's in the middle of the woods, and he set up, you know, in this deer stand. And he'd been out there all day, you know, and he's, you know, had been hunting for the whole week, so he was getting tired. He falls asleep and dozes off. Well, when he awakes, it's now nighttime and it's gotten dark. And as he's adjusting some things in his tree stand, all of a sudden, whoosh, he hears this loud thing move over the top of him through the trees, you know, like it's some kind of large bird or something. And he thinks it's odd because, like, you know, he hasn't seen, you know, birds that big in that area. But then once again, whoosh, right, this big thing just passes over the top of him through the trees, and it's shaking all the branches. And then again, you know, a third time. So, you know, he gets down off his tree stand and is like, okay, it's time to head back to camp. As he starts, you know, walking this trail back to camp, all of a sudden he hears something, you know, say, Donald, Donald, hey, Donald, come play, you know, and this voice is just keeps calling to him. And he, you know, it's like freaking out. He's terrified. So he takes off running, and he's running as fast as he can. And all of a sudden, boom, he trips and he rolls. And he realizes he just tripped over this root that is sticking out of the ground. And when he looks up, he notices this big, eerie-looking tree. And, you know, it has no leaves on it, but it has branches that almost look like hands, and it looks like it has a face. And this tree starts staring at him and opens its eyes, and he can see that this tree has taken some kind of physical, like humanly form, and it starts reaching its branches down, and it grabs Donald and it picks him up and is shaking him and whipping him with the other branches. Well, Donald still manages to hold on to his rifle, and he just starts firing at the tree, and he manages to hit one of the branches that was holding his leg, and it basically breaks and he falls to the ground. So he runs back to his cabin and he gets inside and he locks all the doors. And all night long he can hear the tree lashing at the house trying to get in. And the next morning, all is calm. But he notices outside, there's the tree. It is moved. It's next to the cabin. And he manages to take some pictures which actually show the face in the tree. And this is the picture that Donald took.
In my last video, I shared the history and legends surrounding the Goatman's Bridge. But today, I want to share what I experienced the first time I explored the area for myself. Standing on the bridge itself, I never felt overwhelming fear. There was a heaviness to the atmosphere, almost like the air itself felt different, but nothing that made me want to leave. What caught me off guard happened across Old Alton Road in the clearing where many believe Oscar Washburn's home once stood. As I walked toward the clearing, the first thing I noticed was the smell: sulfur. Some people believe the smell of sulfur can be associated with demonic entities or other unexplained phenomena. Whether that's true or not, I can't say. I only know what I smelt. I continued walking until I reached the middle of the clearing, where the staircase of the old house is believed to have once stood. That's when something changed. The smell of sulfur faded, and suddenly I could smell smoke. Not just a faint scent, the unmistakable smell of a fire. Then I heard footsteps. They sounded like someone walking upstairs directly above me, even though there was no house anymore, just an empty clearing. After a while, I stepped back and watched as a friend of mine walked into the clearing. From where I was standing, something didn't look right. The upper half of his body remained completely visible, but from the waist down, it was as if the lower half of his body slowly faded away. I could actually see through it. To this day, I still can't explain what I saw. Maybe there was a perfectly ordinary explanation. Maybe there wasn't. All I know is that I'll never forget how that place made me feel. Have you ever visited Goatman's Bridge? If you've had your own unexplained experience, I'd love to hear your story. And if you do decide to visit, stay on the path, and may the forest watch over you.
My high school bully called. Caden Anderson called today, and in a more dramatic retelling of one's adult interaction with their childhood bully, the next line would be something like, "I don't know how he found me, but I knew exactly how he found me. He Googled me. There aren't a lot of gals with my name in rural Kentucky, plus I am somewhat of a local celebrity." The first word he spoke was my name, and I recognized the voice immediately. But he also called me many other names during our school days, but name calling was the least of what he did to me. However, in the years since his reign of terror ended, I've grown tremendously, physically, mentally, and spiritually, okay? I am a different woman, and he was no longer a threat. So anyways, he said on the phone, "I owe you a huge apology. I should have made this call years ago, and please believe me, I wanted to do it. I've just been too embarrassed to even speak with you after everything I put you through. I always thought I was just being funny, but after we got out of school, I realized what a jerk I had been." I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But I've seen you doing your paranormal stuff online, and I need your help. I cleared my throat and said, Caden, well, I did hate you for many years. I don't anymore, and I do forgive you. What can I do for you? Caden let out a dramatic whoosh of air and said thank you, followed by, it's my son. He's 9 years old, and something is tormenting him at night, and it's getting really, really bad. He's seeing things and screaming uncontrollably, and a few nights ago, I woke up to the sound of chanting in some foreign language, and he was standing by my bed with a kitchen knife. He can't sleep, he barely eats, and he's so scared and miserable that he barely ever leaves his room anymore. That kid means everything to me. He's the reason that I became a better person. And with confidence, I spoke. Caden, do you remember Aaron Evans? Quietly, he said, yeah, the kid that accidentally stepped in front of the train, right? Calmly, I said, Caden, no one accidentally steps in front of a train. He did it on purpose because you pushed him too far. There was just silence, so I continued. Did you know that my godmother's from Haiti? And she has taught me many things, and voodoo is so powerful, Caden. As I said before, I do forgive you, but when I found Aaron's spirit in the darkness, he asked me for a favor. And you know, he was my best friend, so I couldn't deny his wish. And so tonight, just as I have every night for the past month, I will say the words, and Aaron will step into your son again, and he will rain hell upon you. And I sincerely hope you don't live near railroad tracks.
A follower sent me these photographs after something that she found in the snow outside of her house after hearing this massive creature jump from her roof just 5 feet away from her. And what makes this even stranger is that she lived right down the road from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. So this story was sent to me by a follower, and she told me that she spent years going back and forth with herself if she should really share this publicly or not. And not only because what happened that night completely changed the way that she looks at the world, but because of where it happened, really. That's like kind of the big why. So this happened at the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, and she was around 19 years old, and she was living in Greenbelt, Maryland, in a house near a set of railroad tracks that ran along the same path as NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Now, I'm not saying that that's connected to this story whatsoever, but I definitely think it's a detail worth remembering. Now, Ashley said she was renting a room from a friend whose family worked as mechanics, and they did a lot of their work on the property behind the house. So there was always, the property was always filled with heavy car parts, broken rotors, engines, metal components, all piled around the property. And one winter night around 11 p.m., she was coming home from work just after a snowstorm had passed through the area. And everything was covered freshly in snow and ice. And she slowly pulled into the driveway, which sat on a slight hill, and she gathered all of her belongings and decided to enter through the back door because she didn't want to risk slipping and falling while walking up the icy driveway toward the front of the house. Now, she made her way through the backyard toward the steps, and when she was about 5 feet away from the back door, something massive had jumped from the roof of the house, and she never saw it at all. She said there was this awning and a smaller barrier that was blocking her direct view of where it had possibly landed. But she heard it, and she told me that the sound is something that she will never forget. And whatever had jumped from the roof came crashing down directly onto the pile of car parts that was in the backyard. So metal slammed against metal, and rotors and tools and heavy mechanical parts crashed all together. She said it was such like a violent crash that it startled her, and she immediately froze. And she said there was one thought in her mind, that whatever just landed behind the wall was absolutely enormous to knock all of that over at once and make that noise. So she didn't turn around, she didn't try to see it. She said she just took off and ran into the house. So as she took off back toward the front of the house now, she was slipping and sliding on the ice, desperately trying not to fall. And that's when she heard it move again this time. And whatever it was sprinting and it was leaping, and she went one way and whatever was behind her leaped in the opposite direction. And it was one enormous movement, she said. And then silence out of all the chaos. It took her about 20 seconds to reach the front door, but she said it felt much longer than that. So she crouched down while trying to get the key into the lock, constantly looking over her shoulder and staring up at the roof. Because now she knew something had been up there, and she had no idea where it landed, where it was going, where it had gone. And when she finally got inside, she realized something that absolutely made the situation even worse. She was alone. Everyone else was either at work or out for the night. So she rushed into her bedroom and turned off all the lights, and she stayed there until morning. And she said she barely even slept that night because her bedroom window faced the same side of the house where whatever this was had landed. And throughout the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was outside watching her, and just watching her through the curtains all night long. But when the sun finally had come up, fear gave way to curiosity, and she ran to the back door because she knew the snow was fresh and would tell her whether something had actually been there. What kind of prints or, evidence could we gather? And almost immediately, she saw them. Footprints, massive, bizarre impressions pressed deep into the fresh snow, exactly where she had heard the creature land and leap away from. So she took photographs and a video, and she even placed her own foot beside one of the impressions for comparison. And she wears a woman's size 9 shoe. So according to her, and her measurements, the tracks were approximately 14 inches long and 8 inches wide. But their size wasn't the strangest thing about them. Inside the impressions were these bizarre circular patterns, and circles within circles within circles is how she described it. And she described them as almost resembling like little suction cups. And she said that she had never seen anything like them before, and then she noticed something else. The tracks were suddenly stopped at the entrance to her garage in the back. They didn't continue inside. There were no smaller animal tracks leading away, no obvious trail showing, where the creature or whatever this was had gone, and they simply ended. And she began wondering if whatever had made them had, leaped back onto the roof and took off somewhere. She doesn't know. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't know what she encountered that night. Could there be a natural explanation for the tracks? Yeah, absolutely. But could something falling onto the car parts have, caused those strange circular impressions? Maybe, possibly. But that still leaves one question at the end. What did she hear that jumped from the roof 5 feet away from her land with enough force to send heavy metal car parts crashing together and then escape in what sounded like a single enormous leap? So she told me that this experience absolutely changed her life because for the first time it made her question whether we truly understand everything that shares this world with us. I mean, we never really know. And years later, she saw something that immediately brought her back to that night. And, while watching TV, she was watching the TV series Resident Alien, and she saw strange footprints that looked eerily similar to the ones that she had photographed in her backyard, which I am going to show in this video. Now, maybe that's just a coincidence. Maybe the location near NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center is also a coincidence. And maybe there's a perfectly normal animal somewhere in Maryland capable of jumping from, the roof of a house and leaving enormous circular impressions in the fresh snow, and then disappearing without leaving a trail behind it. I don't know, but she has spent more than a decade waiting to ask the question, which has anyone else ever seen footprints like this or experienced something like this in that area or anywhere really? Because whatever landed 5 feet away from her that night, she believes it wasn't any animal that she had ever seen before. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments if you're from that area of Maryland, or If you've had a similar experience, let me know in the comments.
Hey y'all. So this is Last Thread Before Bed, episode 24. This is a little series where I read scary stories on Reddit before I go to bed, and I try not to get nightmares. So boom, let's get into it. So tonight's story is on subreddit Ghost Stories. It's from user SidVicious42069. North Jersey in the mountains. Our family home was part of a mining railroad system. The old railroad was in our backwoods. Our home was an old slaughterhouse/livestock farm. Dug up skulls and bones my whole childhood. We actually had the ruins of the old slaughterhouse mill in a field with a blood drainage system to a pit with lots of bones. My entire childhood shit would fly off the shelves, onto the floor, or you'd set an object down on the counter and it would be gone. I actually witnessed these things. Sometimes I would feel someone sit on my bed too. As a young adult, I constantly burned sage in my room to try and get rid of whatever was stuck in my room. My parents remodeled the house and found a bunch of animal bones buried in the foundation. And by foundation, I mean a pile of dirt with wood set on top of it. Eventually, I felt the scary thing leave my room, but there was another ghost still present. During COVID, I moved back in with my parents, and a few times a week, I would hear their heavy-ass door open and shut. They had a porch and deck with multiple doors, so air pressure literally could not cause a door slam. I'd hear heavy boot steps downstairs and yell, "Hey Dad!" No response. Check parents' window that overlooked the driveway, and of course, no one would be home. Parents are still in this house and say they constantly find all the kitchen cabinet doors open, or they hear shit in my old room that sounds like a bookcase falling over, and they'll rush up and everything will be perfectly fine. Or things will go missing and they'll find them in my old room. When they remodeled, where the attic door/staircase was became my mini bathroom. My dad never believed in ghosts, but now that he's retired, he 1000% believes we have ghosts. He was in the military, so he thinks it's funny and calls the ghost Gladys, but Def prefers to spend his time outside. My mom does not think it's funny at all, and I'm just glad I live very far away and I refuse to stay with them when I visit. That was a really short one, so I'm going to do another story. So this one is from username Kara1YN. On the same thread, she says she's seen the Hat Man. I saw the Hat Man in my childhood bedroom as a kid, standing in front of my nightlight when I was about 7 or 8. I reached out and touched it, and it felt like my hand was burning up. I have never ever forgotten that experience. I had a very creepy encounter with something whispering in my ear at night when I was in my teens. Same bedroom as the Hat Man encounter. There was something up with my parents' house. I stayed in a haunted dorm for 2 years in college. It used to be a hotel, and a few people had died in it over the years it was in operation. In one incident, me and 3 other roommates had our own attached private bathroom, and we were chilling in our bunks one day when the metal faucet knob just turned on itself, and the sink started spraying. We also heard the bouncing ghost, which was pretty commonplace throughout the building. You'd hear someone bouncing a rubber ball in the hallway, but no one would ever be there when you looked. That is fucking creepy, man. I always assumed it was just the athletic kids going to their practice, but RAs and other people who worked in the building heard the bouncing when class was out of session / summer break and stuff. Also had a ghost in my old apartment who liked to draw things. Follow for more scary stories. Good night.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. Let me apologize now for the camera quality. Something's going on with my phone. Whenever I hook up an external device to it, it is just not working. It's happening with my mic, it's happening with my Apple CarPlay in my car, it's happening with my laptop. So I'm just assuming that the phone is not going to be an option for a good long while. So we're going to be filming on the MacBook for a little while. And I know the camera quality isn't the best, but I would personally have better audio than better camera quality. So I apologize. I'm so sorry. This all happened when I was 13 years old. And whenever I tell people this story, most of them don't believe me. I can't blame them. If somebody else told me this happened to them, I'd probably have a hard time believing it too. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. At the time, my best friend and I spent almost every day outside. We would constantly spend our days exploring, building little forts, climbing trees, finding trails through the woods. There was a forest near where we lived, and we spent so much time in it that it felt like our own little world. We knew every path, every fallen tree, every shortcut, or at least we thought we did. I now don't think that you can ever really have nature fully figured out. One afternoon, we were deep in the forest as usual. and I was standing on a small tree that had fallen over, while my friend stood nearby on the ground. For some reason, I decided I wanted to hear an echo. So I took a deep breath and shouted as loudly as I could, and then I waited. I'd done this a dozen times before, so I stood there, fully expecting for my voice to come back and find me. But this time, nothing. No echo. Actually, no sound at all. The forest had gone completely silent and still around us. It felt strange, like the woods were listening for something, like the entire forest was holding its breath. While I was taking note of this, something answered my yell, and it wasn't my voice. The sound came back from somewhere deeper in the trees. It scared me so bad that I froze, and my eyes went wide as I looked over at my friend, and the expression I saw on her face told me that she heard it too. And then we ran, as fast as we could, branches whipping past our faces, leaves crunching under our feet, and our hearts pounding in our ears. Neither of us chanced a look back, and by the time we reached the edge of the forest, we were both breathing hard and terrified. Eventually, we convinced ourselves that there had to be some sort of explanation to what happened in there. It had to have been another person, or an animal, or maybe we were both just weirdly imagining it. Either way, we both just kind of went on with life, not really wanting to think about it again. But I knew deep down that something wasn't right. A few months later, something would happen that brought all of those same feelings rushing back. It was summer, and I was lying in my bed one night watching a movie. My room was on the upper floor of our house, and there was a slanted roof. My bed sat directly beneath an open window, and from that open window, I heard a sound outside. At first, it was faint, just a small crackling noise, almost sounding like someone moving through leaves. I paused my movie and listened, and then everything went quiet. And then there it was again, crackling. But this time, it was closer. This time, it sounded like it was right outside my window. I sat perfectly still, listening, trying to place the sound, trying to figure out what it could have been. And then suddenly, it sounded like something sprinted away, fast. Entirely too fast for any sort of wildlife that lived around us, and impossibly too fast for any human. But the footsteps, it sounded bare, slapping against the path outside. I didn't even move. I probably wouldn't have been able to, even if I wanted to. I was so scared. I stayed awake for the rest of that night, waiting for the sound to come back, too terrified that it would catch me while I was sleeping. Then about 2 weeks later, some family friends were visiting us. One of them had a daughter around my age, and that evening we decided to go for a walk. There was a path near our house that ran alongside a lake. On one side, you could see the beach and the water stretching out into the distance, and on the other side were houses and the dense forest. The sun was beginning to set, and everything had that beautiful orange golden glow. As I was admiring the pretty evening, I noticed it. Standing near the edge of the forest was a figure, tall and stretched out, with impossible proportions for any human. It was completely black and unmoving. My friend and I exchanged a look and looked back towards where it was standing. Without saying a word, we turned around and started running as fast as we could, and this time, I did look back. And the figure wasn't standing still anymore. It was moving. It was running directly towards us. I only saw it for a second before I turned away again, hoping and praying that it wouldn't catch up to us before we got home. When we finally got there, we were completely out of breath, but we told our parents everything. Eventually, my friend's mother agreed to go back with us to have a look, but when we returned, the figure was gone. The forest was empty, and the path was quiet. I haven't seen it again, but I always wonder if what answered me that day in the forest, what stood outside my window before sprinting away, if they were that thing that was standing at the edge of the tree line, chasing after me. Is it still wandering around out there? Is it waiting for me? Is it watching?
Imagine you are at a point in the ocean where you are closer to any astronaut in space than you are any human here on Earth. We all know I'm talking about Point Nemo. And to be honest with you, it really creeps me out. Let's get into it though. So Point Nemo is located in the Pacific Ocean. So it is known as the oceanic point of inaccessibility. It's the point in the ocean that is farthest from land. So Point Nemo is in a spot in the middle of nowhere. It's surrounded by more than 1,000 miles of ocean in each direction. It was used as almost a dumping ground for space equipment. I guess it was used for fallen debris. Scientists named this location Point Nemo because Nemo is Latin for no one, and there are no human inhabitants over near Point Nemo. So apparently astronauts board the International Space Station, which is roughly 258 miles from Earth's surface at any given time. But since there's no civilization near Point Nemo for at least 1,000 miles, they are way closer to Point Nemo than any of us here are that are on land. So in 1992, there was a man from Croatia, and he was a survey engineer, and he was wanting to find what the furthest point from Earth was in the Pacific Ocean, the most remote place that is furthest from land. Now, he was going to use a computer program to find this point. Now, mind you, he never visited Point Nemo. He strictly used the computer to find these coordinates. They determined in this study that it is very possible that nobody has traveled through these exact coordinates of Point Nemo. So Point Nemo has also been dubbed as the least biologically active area in the world's ocean. So mainly at the bottom of the ocean floor near volcanic vents in Point Nemo is just crabs and some different types of bacteria. In 1997 in Point Nemo, one of the loudest underwater sounds ever was recorded. Despite the distance being more than 3,000 miles apart, underwater microphones detected this loud noise. This mystery noise is now called the bloop. So they could not put together what was so large that made that loud noise. And that is when the legend of the Cthulhu monster from H.P. Lovecraft came in. So in 1926, he wrote The Call of Cthulhu. He wrote that Cthulhu's lair was in this lost city in the Pacific Ocean. So Lovecraft gave this city the coordinates of where Cthulhu is. Now these coordinates are very close to Point Nemo and also where the mysterious bloop sound occurred. So some people believe that the reason Point Nemo is so inaccessible is because Cthulhu's lair is down there. Now H.P. Lovecraft wrote this story in 1928. Now that was 66 years before the actual coordinates were determined at Point Nemo. But later it was determined that the bloop was just the sound of ice breaking off in Antarctica. So now the main significance of Point Nemo was just that it was a dumping ground for scientists to use. They dumped satellites, old parts, spacecraft, pretty much large machinery that cannot re-survive on Earth. So they just throw it in this remote location so that it's pretty much never going to be seen again. Since 1971, more than 263 pieces of trash and junk have been put in Point Nemo. One item is NASA's very first space station named Skylab, and another notable one being the Russian Mir space station. Follow for more creepy shit.
I work in a warehouse, and I took this photo during the night shift. If you zoom in, you can see what appears to be a little girl peeking out from between the pallets. I was staying in a hotel in downtown Chicago for my birthday in 2012. I had my own room and I was completely alone. I was trying to take a photo of me with the city in the background. This was back when phones only had a back-facing camera and you had to flip it over when you wanted to take a photo of yourself. Anyway, in this photo, I caught what looks like a woman sitting on the bed with her jaw almost disconnected, and it looks like she's crying. I didn't see this photo until the next day when I was heading home, and I have no explanation for what that is in the background. This is a family photo that was taken last night. We noticed this horrifying face behind us almost immediately. Some of my family members think that it could be one of our past loved ones coming to visit us. I, however, think that it looks evil, and I don't think it's a family member. While I was clearing out space in my Gmail so that I could keep receiving emails, I came across this photo of my son. I tried enhancing it to get a better look at whatever appears behind him, but I still can't make out what it is. If anyone could help, I'd really appreciate it. The photo has not been edited.
Growing up, I hated staying at my grandparents' house, not because it was old, not because it creaked, but because every night someone or something knocked. Growing up, I hated staying over at my grandparents' house. It's old, musty, and constantly shifting and creaking. But worst of all, there was always this slow, constant knocking. No one knew where it came from, but it was always there. My grandparents grew accustomed to it, saying it was just the pipes, but I never believed that. Growing up, whenever I stayed over, I always felt this eerie sense of being watched, no matter where I went in the house. The house was located on decades-old farmland with nothing around within sight. We'd only visit during holidays when I was a kid, but that slowed when we moved to the nearest city 100 miles away. Now, all these years later, that creepy old house was left to me, and it looked and felt just as I remembered it. I made myself at home in the guest bedroom upstairs. It was small but quaint. I'd planned to stay at the house to fix up a few things here and there and get rid of everything so I could eventually put the place on the market. My family would be very disappointed in me for selling the place since it's been in the family for so long, but I never grew attached to the place. The house felt like it always had its eyes on me, and the land felt like it rejected my very presence. Now as an adult, I'd like to say it was all a figment of my imagination, but the longer I stay here, the stronger the house and land seem to be remembering who I was. And then the knocking started. After working tirelessly on the bottom half of the house, when I finally made my way to bed, about to drift off into sleep, I heard it, knocking. At first I thought it was just in my head, but then it continued. Slow and light at first, then it got firmer, persistent. The more I concentrated on the sound, the more it seemed to knock, like it knew that I knew, and it wasn't just an old house. The knocking continued with no end in sight. At that point, there was no ignoring it. No way it was just the pipes. It was something. The sound sounded to be coming from all over. There was no particular point of which it was coming from. I got out of bed and decided it was time to find the source of the knocking. The house seemed to register my acknowledgement, and the knocking got louder, harder. This should have been the moment that I left that cursed house, but I didn't, and I really wish I had. I walked out into the hallway, stood, and waited. Bang, bang. There was no more knocking, but banging. I put an ear to the wall to see if I could pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It banged again. This time, it sounded like it came from the end of the hall. I walked down and heard another bang, sounding like it came from the hall closet. I opened the door and found it empty. Then another bang directly above my head. I looked up and barely noticed a thin rope hanging from the ceiling. After staring at it for a few moments, I realized what it was. It was a pull ladder. I had never seen it before, let alone known that the house had an attic. I let out a shaky breath and pulled the string. With some effort, the ladder finally came down. I stared at it in disbelief. Why was there a ladder to the attic in the closet? The closet itself was a little long and narrow, always empty, but had just enough space for a ladder to come down and someone to climb up. I heard the bang again, louder than last time, and against my better judgment, I climbed and went up. When I made my way to the top, there were long, narrow windows on the roof, giving the attic a light glow from the moonlight, providing just enough light for me to see. I pulled myself up, and I'm able to stand at full length comfortably. The floor felt sturdy, so surely this attic was built to be used, but it was void of anything, no boxes, nothing. Just as my eyes started to adjust to the dim moonlight, I suddenly felt the temperature drop. A chill went down my spine, and I heard it again. Bang! I quickly turned around and shifted my eyes from side to side and saw nothing. Again, bang! This time coming from the front left corner, and that's when I saw it. A small door up against the wall. It couldn't be bigger than a crawl space. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I slowly crossed the attic to the door. Then the knocking returned, and this time it was coming from the little door. As I got closer, the door handle started to jiggle, and the knocking grew more intense, like whatever was on the other side of that door was desperately trying to get out. At that point, I wanted to turn around and leave, but as much as I tried, I couldn't get my body to respond. I kept walking towards the little door, and when I was just about a foot away with an outstretched arm, ready to turn the knob and open the door, the whole attic exploded with banging noises. It was coming from everywhere, all at once. Not at all like before. I let out a terrifying shriek, and that seemed to snap me out of whatever trance I was under. I ran across the attic and climbed back down the stairs. The banging continued and followed me all the way down the stairs to the first floor. I grabbed my keys off the coffee table, running out the door, not even caring to close and lock up the place. The banging continued and could be heard echoing into the night sky. It sounded like the house was being blown apart from the inside, but the house stood still. Barefoot and with no personal belongings, I put my car in reverse and drove out of there as fast as I could. The place finally sold, and after about 6 months from selling it, I received a phone call from the realtor, Mike. Hey, Mr. Jones, I hope you've been well. Listen, the new owners of your grandparents' property completely renovated the place, and it looks absolutely stunning. They love the property, he said in his cheery voice. That's great to hear, Mike. I'm glad the place is exactly what they were looking for, I replied dryly. Oh, they're over the moon. So listen, before they remodeled the place, they had the land surveyed and went by the book, and nothing seemed to be wrong with the bones of the house or the property itself, and they're now living in the renovated home. My stomach dropped, knowing he didn't just call to let me know the new owners were happy. So he continued. So the strangest thing has been happening. They've been complaining about knocking that seems to be coming from the house. And I know this sounds crazy, but did your grandparents ever complain about anything like that happening to them? And yeah, the end. Have a good night.
This happened at a pet store, specifically in Guanajuato. It's an employees-only area, and I didn't take the photo myself. It was sent to me by somebody who conducts training courses there. That person had to take the picture because they were helping with closing. After turning off the lights and going back to check that everything had been cleaned, they saw this. This picture was taken with a digital camera around 2005 or 2006 at the Crescent Hotel by my grandmother. She's taken many pictures there over the years and caught orbs, but this is the only one she's gotten with what appears to be a presence located at the end of the hallway. She didn't notice anything at the time, but caught it after being home and looking through photos while downloading them to the computer. I worked at a retail store and they transferred me to a different location where I always felt a very strange vibe. As part of our job, we're required to take pictures of the entire store, and in one of the photos of the stock room, this appeared. Just to clarify, there was absolutely nothing in that spot that could have resembled this.
This story was submitted by a woman who works at the hospital night shift. She says that the experience that she had was so traumatic and terrifying that she no longer works at the hospital night shift. She would like to be anonymous, so let's call her Brenda. Brenda was working night shift at the hospital as a cleaning lady. She had been there for about a year. She had come across some weird, unsettling things working night shift at the hospital, but it wasn't anything that she couldn't handle. Until one day they had her clean a completely different part of the hospital. It was an older wing of the hospital that she wasn't very familiar with. She went ahead and did her usual routine. As she's there getting her things ready, she typically would listen to music. She would have her AirPods in, and she would sometimes pray to herself because it just made her feel more comforting. It's an eerie, late at night, it's dark, it's the hospital, it's a little creepy. So she would pray to herself, listen to music, and go about her day. That night, as she's listening to music, she's doing her thing, she's praying, she starts to hear a voice coming from a different room across from her. She's thinking maybe she's hearing things, maybe she's exhausted. She takes off her headphones and listens to this voice. The voice is repeating the same prayer that she's saying. The only difference is that this voice is a deeper voice, and it's almost like it's mocking her. Trying to shake it off and thinking that maybe she's just, again, exhausted, she's hallucinating. She puts her headphones back on, she prays a little bit harder, and she continues doing her cleaning. When she then hears that same voice, the only difference is that the voice was coming from her AirPods. Freaking out, she pops her AirPods off. She looks at her phone, and there's no way that there's anything on her phone that would have made that sound. She looks around, decides to like peek her head in that room. She's braver than most. She peeks her head in that room. That room is completely like empty. There's no one in there. Thinking that's it, like she's done, she decides that she's gonna start heading back towards the elevator. She says that she was kind of like running. She was running at this point with her cart back to the elevator. She can feel that there are eyes on her, that whatever it is literally like right behind her. Right as she gets to the elevator doors open, she gets in, she hears laughter, like someone laughing. It was like this thing was amused, like it knew that it was messing with her and that it was scaring her. Once she got back to like where like her section, she told her supervisor about it and pretty much told him that she was not gonna go back over there. They went and checked the security cameras and they only saw her in the cameras. It's only her like freaking out and like running. There's no other person there. So where did that voice come from?
If you were abducted as a child and then held in captivity for 8 entire years, during which you were subjected to horrendous things, and then you escaped, would you buy the house that you were held captive in as an adult? Well, she did, and this is one of the craziest survival stories I have ever heard. Not to mention, this case inspired a movie called 3096 Days, and it shows how this woman actually escaped her kidnapper. It is by far one of the most suspenseful movie scenes I have ever watched, and since this is based on a true story, let's talk about it. This is Natasha Kampusch. She was only 10 years old when she was kidnapped off the streets in broad daylight, a day that would forever change her life. Natasha was born and raised in Vienna, Austria by her mom and dad, and she had 2 older adult sisters. She also had a ton of nieces and nephews, and from the outside looking in, life was normal. Her mom and dad separated when she was really young, and behind closed doors, her parents would sometimes slap Natasha if she didn't listen. No one really knew this about her life though, but it deeply affected Natasha. So much so that on March 2nd, 1998, she was even contemplating ending her own life, but she never got the chance to. And instead, she was subjected to something straight out of a nightmare. That morning, 10-year-old Natasha left her mom's home in Vienna to start walking to school, but she never arrived. When she never came back home either, her mom knew something was horribly wrong and reported her missing to the police. Pretty much right away, a massive search was launched, and a 12-year-old witness actually came forward and said something alarming. This witness said that they saw Natasha while she was walking to school, and then they saw her being dragged into a white minibus by 2 men. This was a really solid first lead, so police tracked down every minibus in the area to interview the owner and examine the vehicles. And this took a long time because there were 776 minibuses. Who knew they were so popular? Eventually though, police interviewed Natasha's actual kidnapper, 36-year-old Wolfgang Priklopil. Wolfgang had a white minibus just like what the witness saw, and he lived about half an hour away from Vienna near Gensendorf in an old house that he inherited from his grandparents when they died in 1984. He was a communications technician, an only child, and was born and raised in Vienna. Those who knew him said he was a really weird and disturbed guy. Anyway, Wolfgang told police when they knocked on his door that he'd been home alone the morning of the kidnapping, and he had only used his minibus that day to transport rubble from the construction of his house to the dump. This was a flat-out lie, but the police believed him. Little did they know, though, that Wolfgang had actually kidnapped Natasha, and she was being held captive in a concrete bunker right below their feet. So going back to the morning of the abduction, Wolfgang saw Natasha walking down the street and decided to kidnap her. Natasha said that she tried to scream as he was forcing her into the car, but she froze. And as hard as she tried, nothing came out. Wolfgang then took her to his house, wrapped her in a blanket, and forced her into a 5x5 meter underground bunker in his home. He then took off her shoes and burned them, telling her, quote, "You won't be needing those again." End quote. For the next 8 years, Wolfgang held Natasha captive in this windowless, soundproof cellar beneath his garage. You could only access this bunker via a trap door in the garage, which then led to a narrow flight of stairs and eventually the bunker. The entrance to this room was a small steel hatch hidden behind a cupboard, so it was extremely well hidden and literally no one knew that it was there. And like I said, Wolfgang inherited this house from his grandpa, who built it after World War II. What would eventually become the room room where Natasha was imprisoned was originally built as a bomb shelter, and by the time she was forced to live down there, it was damp and cold. No one could hear her scream. During the 8 years she was in captivity, Wolfgang brutally beat her up to 200 times a week and would occasionally SA her. And for the first 6 months of captivity, she wasn't allowed to leave this bunker for any reason. Wolfgang controlled all the lighting and electricity, so he would randomly turn the lights on and off. And since there were no windows, Natasha tried her best to count each second as they passed so she could try and remember when it was daytime and nighttime. But eventually it all blurred together and she could no longer tell. Wolfgang also installed a two-way intercom so he could yell commands at her, and he did this so frequently that Natasha compared it to torture methods. During the first year, he would bring Natasha food, books, and a TV, and he would only allow her small periods of TV and radio time, usually only a couple of hours total, and he would only allow foreign broadcast so she could never see or hear updates on the search for her. Natasha found it strange though, because he would never come down to see her on the weekends, but she soon learned that it was because his mom would come and stay overnight with him every single weekend. So as much as she tried to yell to get her attention, his mom never knew because it was soundproof. She had no idea that a little girl was being held captive and was subjected to horrendous things right beneath her feet. In 2000, Natasha got her first period, and she said after this, everything changed. She said it was at this point that her childhood ended. At this point in time, Wolfgang would start bringing her up into the house, and over time, he would allow it more and more. But her time up there wasn't any better. He forced her to meticulously clean half naked. He also wanted to renovate his house, so he forced her to do all of the physical construction work. This work was way harder and more advanced than anything she knew how to do at 12 years old. But if she did even one thing wrong, he would beat her so badly that she could hear her bones crack. He was a clean freak too, so he made her wear a plastic bag over her hair so none of it would fall in his house. Eventually, he shaved her hair off altogether. If she cried, which was forbidden because he was worried that her tears would ruin his floor, he would choke her and drown her just enough to almost kill her. But as the years went on and she did more and more
might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Physical labor, she also got stronger. Strong enough that on one occasion, she attacked Wolfgang. But sadly, he was too strong and immediately overcame her. After this, he would restrict her food. And one of his favorite things to do was starve her as punishment so that she would be too weak to try and escape. After the first few years, like I said, Wolfgang would allow Natasha to come up into the house with him. But at night, and when he had to leave for work, he forced her back into the bunker. As time went on, he felt comfortable enough to let her outside to work in the garden alone, which she spent a lot of her time doing. She was still stuck there because he had a really big, heavy gate that was always locked. But now she was outside on her own. Because of this, so many people actually saw Natasha, like his neighbors and even one of his business partners. According to him, Natasha seemed happy and relaxed in the garden when he unexpectedly stopped by. Wolfgang always told them that she was a new housekeeper. Eventually, outside time turned into him letting her leave the house in his presence, but he threatened to kill her if she tried to escape or draw any sort of attention. Like one time, the two of them left to go to the store when they were pulled over by a police officer during a routine check. Natasha said that she tried making direct eye contact with the police officer to secretly tell him that she was in trouble and needed help, but the officer ignored her. At one point in time, Wolfgang even took her on a vacation near her old home in Vienna, but she never had a good chance to escape. Back in captivity, Natasha said that while the sexual abuse was minor, it did happen, but most of the time, he would chain her to his bed naked while he slept, or he would tie their hands together at night just so that they could cuddle. He was a creep. One of the main reasons that she didn't initially try to run away was because Wolfgang told her that all of the doors and windows on the house were booby-trapped with high explosives, and he also told her that he carried a gun 24/7. So if she even tried to escape, he would shoot her dead instantly. Natasha grew to deeply hate Wolfgang, and she admitted that she often fantasized about killing him and chopping his head off with an axe. She did everything she could to try and survive while in captivity, and one of the things that really kept her going was imagining her older self coming back to rescue her. And when I say Natasha was super smart, I mean it, because at such a young age, she started thinking of ways that she could survive. And she came up with this idea that if she acted younger than she was, then he wouldn't kill her. So she regressed to a toddler age. She would constantly ask Wolfgang to tuck her in at night and read her stories. I do think this worked, and she was so brave for trying new things in hopes of surviving just one day longer. So while this was all going on behind the scenes, everyone back home thought Natasha was dead. I mean, at first it seemed like she just vanished into thin air, and rumors rumors about her disappearance really started to spread. Some people thought that she was sold into a sex trafficking ring, while others thought that she became a victim of organ theft. Regardless, no one knew that she was still alive that entire 8 years, just 30 minutes from her home where she was kidnapped. Right before Natasha disappeared, she had gone on vacation with her dad to Hungary, so when she went missing, she was still carrying her passport with her. Because of this, police thought that she may have been abducted and taken to a different country, so they heavily expanded their search abroad, but they found absolutely nothing. Fast forward 8 years later, and a disturbing and shocking discovery would be made. This brings us to August 23rd, 2006. That afternoon, Natasha was cleaning and vacuuming Wolfgang's minibus out in the garden. At some point, he got a phone call, but he couldn't hear her over the sound of the vacuum, so he went around the corner and out of sight to take the call. When Natasha looked up, she realized that the big, heavy gate that was always locked was now unlocked and ajar. So she made a split-second decision to take off running away from the house. She sprinted through neighboring gardens, down multiple streets, and jumped fences, all the while asking anyone she passed on the street to please call the police. But they all ignored her, so she continued to run. About 5 minutes later, she stopped at a 71-year-old's house and pounded on the window, saying, quote, "I am Natasha Kampusch." End quote. That homeowner was nice enough to call the police, who then rescued her. Right away, police knew that it was really Natasha just based on a scar that she had on her body, but DNA tests later confirmed it too. Natasha appeared to be in good health, but she was extremely pale and skinny, having only gained 7 pounds in the 8 years that she had been missing. She then told police all about Wolfgang, how he kidnapped her, and where he lived. So police went directly to his home, but he wasn't there. As they searched the home, they discovered the bunker where Natasha had been held captive, and in it was her passport from 8 years prior. Sadly, police were just too late. Knowing that he would be caught, Wolfgang drove himself to the nearby train station in Vienna and killed himself. He threw himself in front of an oncoming train just hours after Natasha escaped. That had been his plan all along. He told Natasha that if she ever escaped, police would never catch him alive. The timing of Natasha escaping was so critical because police found that literally right before she escaped, Wolfgang was trying to create fake papers as a Czech citizen so that he could live a new life there with Natasha. So finally, after 8 years, Natasha was finally free. It's just sad that Wolfgang got the easy way out and was never held criminally responsible for his actions. Although at the time this took place, the penalty for kidnappers who imprisoned their victims in Austria was not very harsh at all. If found alive, Wolfgang would have been facing just 10 years in prison, literally only 18 months longer than Natasha was held in captivity. So personally, I don't think that would have been justice either. After he was found, police ran his DNA through a nationwide criminal database to see if he could have been involved in other missing person cases, but there wasn't a match. Authorities also extensively searched his house up and down to see if there were any other hidden rooms or doors that could have been hiding more victims, but they never found anything. What's really sad though is that Natasha was finally reunited with her family after the fact, but they didn't really have a relationship after this, which is really heartbreaking. In 2010, a documentary called Natasha Kampusch, 3,096 Days in Captivity was released, and in it, Natasha sympathized with Wolfgang. She said she felt sorry for him and called him a poor soul. According to the police, Natasha sobbed when they told her that Wolfgang was found dead. Furthermore, Natasha talked about how she grew feelings for him and even lit a candle for him at the morgue. Despite this though, she knows that he is a criminal and what he did was horrible. Psychologists have gone on to suggest that she may have Stockholm Syndrome, but she is adamant that she does not. She also says that anyone who says this about her is super disrespectful, which I kind of get. I mean, the situation she was in is extremely unique, complex, and horrific. Like, imagine 8 years of your life being held hostage in these conditions. Natasha says she is allowed to navigate that and to process her own emotions against her kidnapper. She also went on to say that she didn't feel like she missed out on anything during her imprisonment. She said it saved her from drinking, smoking, and hanging out with bad people, which I guess is a good perspective to have. It's just sad because that's the life she was forced to live, and she definitely missed out on her childhood years. It just doesn't seem like she realized realizes it. Natasha went on to write a book called 3096 Days, which was then adapted into this 2013 movie under the same name. Like I said, this is one of the craziest, most intense movies I've ever seen, strictly because of the escape scene. I think I watched this on Netflix a long time ago, and I just looked it up, but it doesn't look like it's available on there anymore. But I'm telling you guys, if you rent this movie, you will not be disappointed. In 2016, Natasha released a second book called 10 Years of Freedom, which I haven't read, but I definitely am now after researching this case. What's super crazy, at least to me, is that Natasha now owns the house where she was imprisoned. She claimed the house from Wolfgang's estate, and she said she did this to protect it from vandals and from being torn down. She said she kept it all these years later because it was a big part of her formative years, and she's been known to frequently go to the house to clean it. And part of the documentary was actually filmed in the bunker where she was held captive. It's kind of crazy. In 2011, she had the bunker filled in, but I can't imagine how unsettling and creepy it must feel to still go into that house. I don't know how she does it. Natasha went on to say, quote, "I have a stamp on my forehead that says victim of violence. I will be ostracized for the rest of my life." End quote. She also said that she bought the house to reclaim the interpretation of her own story. All I know is that Natasha is one of the strongest people I have ever read about. To survive 8 years in captivity like that, suffering horrendous abuse, only to bravely escape, have grace for her kidnapper, and go on to conquer what would be most people's fear of returning to the scene of the crime. Because not only did she go back into that bunker willingly, she bought it. I'll leave you guys with one question.